Inspirational. Powerfully refining. And unapologetically controversial. Conversations with the Royal Empress. The entire world knows the secret of who you are. Now is the time to step into your queendom and become the Royal Empress that you're meant to be. One woman at a time. Conversations with the Royal Empress. Now Akila, she's the analytical Empress. Akima, she's the Empress that will challenge you. And Lakashay Nadira, she's the Empress who tells it like it is. Now, straighten up your crown and be elevated through conversations. Conversations with the Royal Empress.
Welcome to this week's podcast. This is Dr. Hakima Jahad Muhammad. Joining me today is my fellow Royal Empress, Akila and Lakashay.
Peace, everybody.
Peace.
All right. Today's topic is, how has the system of white supremacy affected the mental health of Black America? The racism of white America has affected us, but today we brought in a special guest to go in depth and to help understand why white supremacy has affected us mentally, and to also discuss what we need to do to overcome it. Today's guest is someone that I've been knowing for over 20 years, someone that I admire and respect, and was very instrumental in inspiring me to go back to school to get my doctorate degree. I want to introduce to you Dr. Steffie Turner.
Greetings.
Welcome, Dr. Steffie.
Thank you.
Dr. Turner, I'm going to read your bio for our listening audience. So, Dr. Steffie Turner holds a doctorate of clinical psychology and a master's of clinical psychology from Argosy University, Illinois School of Professional Psychology. Dr. Steffie Turner also received a Master's of Science in School Guidance and Counseling from Chicago State University and a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from University of Arkansas. Her postdoctoral training was at the Arkansas State Hospital Forensic Psychology Program. Her specialty is determining a person's competency to stand trial and determining not guilty by reason of insanity. Dr. Turner has worked as a psychologist, providing treatment to adults, adolescents, and children in various settings such as forensic and psychiatric hospitals, outpatient clinics, prisons, and for the military. Wow, that's very impressive. She has also worked as a professor of developmental psychology at the University of Arkansas at Monticello. Dr. Turner's dissertation clinical research project was titled The Cognitive and Psychosocial Basis of Racial Inferiority, 2001. She was awarded a fellowship at the Illinois School of Professional Psychology, where her focus was on multicultural issues and racial disparity. Wow. Wow. I have to say wow again.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed with that one.
Yeah, did all that while I was in the nation too at the same time.
Wow. So you did all this while you were a member of the Nation of Islam. Woo!
Get
so
my doctorate, yeah.
Oh my God.
If it wasn't for the nation, I don't think I could have achieved it. It taught me a lot of discipline, to channel my anger and stuff. So
wow.
It taught me refinement.
Okay. Now that I read your bio, is there anything that you would like to add or like to say? I'm going to add one more sentence to your bio.
Okay.
I'm going to put matchmaker because you were very instrumental And,
The
and, and, and me and my husband coming together, yeah, I got to call you the Oracle. I got to add that in there too. You were very instrumental in me and my husband getting together. You spoke highly of him and said, "This is a good catch, sis." So I got to
Yes,
add that last statement in your bio. You got to add matchmaker on
yeah,
there.
that's true. I was thinking of that this morning because both of you are my friend. Yeah.
So thank you very much, sister. And if there's anything you would like to add to your bio, or is anything you would like to say to our listening audience before we start our interview?
I think that's just about it, except for just, I think me being in the Nation of Islam while I was getting my doctorate degree, that helped me with the discipline, helped me a whole lot. And it helped me to channel my anger that I had towards, white people coming from Arkansas and growing up in a very the poorest region in the United States, the Delta. So I saw a lot of racism firsthand, and so I was extremely angry. You probably remember that, So to me, the Nation was like a high-tech behavior modification program. So it helped me to, channel my anger into something more positive and go to school and focus and get my doctorate degree. So I'm grateful for that. So that was my therapy.
Like I said, you have a question for Dr. Turner?
Well, as I'm listening to you, hey, Dr. Turner, first of all, me and Steffi go way back too. I've
Yes,
been knowing you for over 20 years as well, and
yes.
it's a blessing to have you on the show. I thought it would be an awesome idea, and so I'm just happy. I feel really at home. I love when we are able to interview people and we can have that connection, and
Yeah.
so I'm looking forward to this evening. So as you were talking, and I listened to you say towards the end, you mentioned that you were able to develop a level of discipline, and it helped you to get through your program, and it helped you to channel some of the anger. Now, some of our listening audience might be surprised to hear that, because some may think that it would have done the opposite, channeling your anger against the anger that you had towards white people growing up in the South. How is that possible when, we hear that that's not necessarily what the Nation has us to do? We hear a lot of these stereotypes. We hear, that we're taught to just hate white folks and take all of our energy and, use it towards another race of people. So can you just kind of clarify that? Because I'm sure somebody may have that. They might have been like, what? Helped you to channel that energy? What? So tell us more about that, Dr. Steffie, please.
Yes. Well, I didn't need any help, to have any negative feelings toward white people. That was programmed in me from my earliest memory as a child. My mother is still a maid. She's 85 years old, so she cleans houses for white people. I come from a family of servants. So my grandfather was a sharecropper, and my mother is a maid. So I watched her, work for white people, and they were very I grew up in a very racist environment where we were called nigger, all the time. I was at the age of 10, I was outside, and some white boys shot me in the chest with a BB gun right in my breast that they were starting to develop. And I remember witnessing my mother a sense of powerlessness, because she tried to go to tell the little white boys' parent what they had did to me. So she showed them the wound, showed his mother, and she just looked at her son and just blew cigarette smoke in my mother's face and told her son, don't do it again. And so that was it. But, they continued to, taunt me, and bully us, but it was nothing my mother could do about it. So we had to just stay away from them. So I watched my mother say yes, ma'am, to young white girls that was younger than me, because that was the protocol, the norm in the South. So this white family she works for, the young girl is 4 years younger than me. So my mother would say to her, no, ma'am, yes, ma'am. I had to watch that all my life. Still see it when I come home. So I was always pretty angry towards them. I was initially afraid of them. And then as I got older, the fear turned into just, anger and rage. So I started having like blackout rages toward white people in 8th grade. And I became violent towards them. So I kind of had a conduct disorder. And as a teenager, by the time I hit puberty, I should have been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder and then later conduct disorder. but I never got any treatment or help. Sports helped me, and I was very smart academically. That helped me. So I went to college, graduated, joined the nation, still had that rage. And so being in the nation, we were taught to look within ourselves and to, to deal with our own feelings, our own issues, and to be responsible for our behavior and our conduct. So the nation taught me the history of our relationship with white people, but ultimately it was up to us as a person and as a race to, to break that sense of fear and powerlessness that we had, in relation to white people. So I had to accept my own feelings and do something about it myself, which was not to waste my time on hating them, but to just do better for myself.
Thank you so much for providing us with that clarity. I think it's really important, that people hear that, because sometimes when we constantly hear things over and over again, we believe that they're true, and it's just a lot of misinformation out there. So I just want to thank you so much, and
Yes.
For clearing that up, and thank you for just being brave.
Kind of
that's a
therapeutic
lot.
just saying it. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
That is a lot that one has to deal with, especially growing up as a child in the South. Southern racism is a lot different, from the racism that one may experience in the North.
Your background and what you've experienced really qualifies you to address this topic today. I mean, you coming up from an environment in which you experience extreme racism, to be educated about it and to go out in the world to educate us and teach others is amazing. I want to go right to our question of how has white supremacy affected the mental health of Black Americans?
Well, for one thing, it's definitely affected our self-esteem and our self-concept, and to make us have low self-esteem and a poor self-concept. And self-esteem and self-concept are two different things. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself, and self-concept is how you view yourself. And so because of the labels and the messages we've gotten from the dominant society, is that, it's a lot of negativity. Black people are seen as, lazy, shiftless. Black women are considered open markets, constantly soliciting sex. Black males are stereotyped as not caring for their children or wanting to, be a part of a family unit. So we've had a lot of negative images put on us, so it affects our self-esteem. So if your self-esteem is low, then that can lead to feeling depression, feeling depressed or helpless. It has also affected our, our physical health. I know for myself, having to suppress my anger for so long towards white people, it affected my blood pressure. And I consider myself to be a very healthy person. I do eat one meal a day. Had stopped eating beef and pork at the age of 22. So I have a very healthy lifestyle, but yet I still developed high blood pressure. And they say it was genetic, but I think what I noticed is that I had to suppress my anger all the time. Even after being, trained with the nation, being at work, having white co-workers get away with things that I knew was wrong, that I couldn't get away with, or mistreating other patients and stuff like that, I would stifle my anger. And so that would cause my blood pressure to be high in those situations. Now, when I got home and could meditate, it would go down. So that's one way it can cause you to have physical problems. And then it definitely contributes to depression. Now, as I was preparing to come on the show tonight to speak with you all, one thing that I found out is that for the first time ever in history, the suicide rate for Black people has risen, in particular for young Black children between the ages of 5 and 11. Their rate of suicide is significantly higher than white children of the same age. And that's major right now in the mental health community. So you got young Black boys and girls between the ages of 5 and 11, they're killing themselves at a higher rate than their white counterparts. And now the interesting part about that is all of the other psychologists and other professionals, they don't seem to know why that is the case. But so I did some additional research, and this study is in the Journal of the American Medical Association. It was they did the study came out in 2015, and they repeated it again this year, and the results continue to show that Black children between the ages of 5 and 11 are committing suicide at a higher rate than white children. One of the reasons is that, you know, our society has become more conscious now because we have access to more information. People are more receptive to, like, people like the minister, people like Dick Gregory. You got books like the new Jim Crow, books like that. So we're becoming more conscious, and we're teaching our children. However, you know, they said that ignorance is bliss. So this is just a theory I have, that because we're informing our children more about what racism is and what our experiences have been with white people, but we don't have an answer for it. We haven't stopped it. So the children are becoming more and more depressed. And then you're seeing these death rituals played out on television with the murder of Trayvon Martin, you know, Michael Brown. And we see this on Facebook or social media. And every time you click on that image, you're being traumatized by it. So that may be one of the reasons why children are choosing to take such an extreme measure of suicide. And the method of suicide that these Black children are using is very extreme. It's strangulation and then jumping off high structures. So it's a very impulsive behavior. And the study also looked at 2 children here in DC. One child killed himself this year through strangulation. And then another child at the end of last year did the same thing right here in DC. So, and also from, you know, cyberbullying too. And then just seeing a lot of, you know, gruesome images of racism activities by the police, and then helplessness by the people that should protect them, which is their parents, and maybe facing racism from authority figures like teachers at school, or maybe police officers in the community. So that's a very sobering statistic. It's sad. It's depressing in itself, because, you know, our children are our future, and so if they're checking out that early, that's pretty sad.
Oh, I didn't know that. I have seen, just from my review of social media, because I'm always looking for trends. I have noticed the increase in suicides among our children, and I thought about years ago, 15, 20 years ago, as a people, suicide was not something of a high interest to us in comparison to other cultures. And one was curious to know of what was causing the suicide rate to increase among our children. Wow, it's just interesting facts that you presented. It's like, wow.
Yeah, and what's disappointing to me is the other scholars, the other psychologists and social workers. They're saying they don't know why. They're saying that it's a lack of access, possibly to quality mental health treatment. That may be a factor, or the stigma that Black people tend to associate with getting mental health treatment. Maybe so. But with 13-year-olds, from the age of 13 on up, our numbers are good. We are not committing suicide at a higher rate than other races of people. And I just want to go on record to say, I think suicide is sad for anybody. You know, it's a sad thing. But, you know, it's very sad to know that somebody as young as 5 has that thought, and then has a plan and has actually carried it out. And that's alarming. And of course it hits close to home because I'm Black and I got Black grandchildren. So, but I would have liked to have seen some of the scholars to take to think, just to be a little bit more honest, you know, the effects of racism. I think I found maybe 1 or 2 people that took the leap to say that it was possibly all of the stuff that's been happening in our society to other young people, you know, just being killed and no consequence. And then also they saying that Black parents are sitting down and having that talk with our kids. This is what it means to be Black. We thinking we're preparing them, which we are, but it's a consequence to it too, because you're telling them about these negative and hateful people, but then we don't have an answer to it. And then to for your child to know that you as a mother or a father cannot protect them from hunter or forest next door, that's pretty debilitating. Because I remember knowing probably about the age of 5 or 6, that my mother couldn't protect me from the white kids next door. It was up to me to protect myself, so.
Dr. Turner, this is Akila. I just wanted to follow up with you on that because I've read the same study that you're talking about.
Yes.
And I did read how our numbers are not that high when we become teenagers.
Right.
So I'm listening, but how do you kind of reconcile that with if at 13 we're not doing the same thing that perhaps somebody would do at 11? What's the shift between the younger years and the teen years? The numbers are showing that the rates are not high among Black teenagers, but we're seeing it in the younger children. I'm just wondering what is the shift, because I would imagine that the older children are the ones that have more access to the internet and to all of these different things that we're seeing, whereas the younger children aren't.
Right. Well, the difference, you can look at it developmentally. When you're between the ages of 5 and 11, you're prone to be a little bit more impulsive. And some children, about the age of 4 and 5, they don't necessarily know that death is not reversible. If you do it, it's forever. And so when you're younger, you tend to be more impulsive. The brain isn't as developed. And then when you're a teenager, you start to go into thinking a little bit about consequences, a little bit more so. But I think it's the issue of impulsivity. And then two, another factor is that in the white households, suicide had went down for that age group because white parents seem to get the lesson a little bit quicker, or have how can I better say this? They have taken better steps to secure their homes. Like if they have firearms, they're going to take that extra step. They have the guns and stuff put away or locked up. They may, take extra measures. Well, we may not, because we didn't think our children would even talk about it or do something like that. So it's impulsivity, and it's like, I guess you can say education about safety measures in the home.
I think it's also a lack of understanding, because I don't know about them feeling. I'm just curious, because if they feel like that they can't be protected, I mean, it's kind of a different time period from when we were growing up.
Right.
And it just seems that they would feel more protected by their parents than not. But you never know. I mean, does it just in the study, because I don't know this, is it like a certain segment of Black society where you're seeing these numbers in the youth, or is it just across the board? Does socioeconomic factors play a role?
It did not indicate that if you were from a higher socioeconomic class, that suicide that was a barrier. So money wasn't a barrier. It didn't say that. It just seemed to be across the board. And when we talk about protection, a child may feel like, well, maybe a parent can protect you to a certain degree, but when you're seeing other youth like Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin being killed, and you see that image replayed over and over, and then there was no justice. We saw a weeping mother, a broken, grieving father, but no justice. It was another kid, his first name was Kendrick. He was killed shortly after Trayvon, and he was found rolled up in a rug in a gym, and his organs had been removed. So not only was he killed, or he died under mysterious circumstances, his corpse was violated, and still there has been no answers, no justice. And so it's like the boogeyman has become real. When we're kids, we are afraid of the dark and afraid of ghosts and all of this, but now somebody's actually doing something to us or to them, and nothing is happening.
It sounds like to me that maybe parents need to take a closer look, and that perhaps they should limit their conversation or the exposure of children.
Exactly. We may be telling them too much too soon. So I wrote down here, the burden of being conscious versus ignorance is bliss. So, I think we should tailor our conversations to a child's age, so we want to tell them certain things, but not too much and too fast. But not to do like our parents, like my parents, they didn't tell me anything about racism. It just hit me in the face. So we had a boycott in my town maybe 2 years before I started first grade, where the whole town went up in flames because of racism after Martin Luther King's assassination. I grew up about 45 minutes from Memphis. And I think it hadn't been 10 years since Dr. King was killed. And so we were still segregated. And it was a big conflict with the black versus the whites. And I remember the town burning, but I remember nobody ever talked about it. And I just had this faint memory of it. And I put something on Facebook, and my cousins, who my mother raised, they were in high school at the time, and their generation started speaking out on Facebook about it. But, you know, they were attacked by the police, and they had to set out of school a whole year because nobody could protect them. And then they couldn't go back to school because the police and, you know, white officials were the ones actually attacking them during the so-called riot and boycott in my town.
I wanted to kind of go back to your dissertation
Mm-hmm.
and the cognitive and psychosocial basis of racial inferiority.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just kind of curious about that. Like, what did you discover? Kind of the conversation that we're having today, because it seems like that obviously the inferiority is part of the effects.
Right. Well, what I looked at, I was inspired by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, her book, The ISIS Papers, and she was inspired by Neely Fuller, who spoke about racism and white supremacy. And Neely Fuller talked about the nine people activities, and he described them as economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. So what I did in my dissertation, I looked at some major institutions. I looked at politics, medicine, education, and healthcare. And what I found out, I looked at those major institutions, and I saw how racism started first it started with religion, where there was a belief that we were inferior because of, you know, Ham and all of that from the Bible. We was cursed. And from that inspired the politicians to decide that, you know, legally we were considered inferior, 3/5 of a human being and 1 drop of, the 1/5 rule. I think it's a 1 drop of black blood rule, and the fact that we weren't even considered human beings. So that was the politics. And then that led into, we started forming institutions like, education facilities. We were not given adequate buildings or materials to be educated. The government put in place the Freedmen's Bureau to help us to become educated. But the Freedmen's Bureau basically sabotaged our education. We had substandard textbooks. If you grew up like my mother did, if you were a sharecropper or came from a farming family, the only days you could go to school is if it rained or the weather was bad or inclement weather. So my mother, they went to school the first day and got a couple of books and didn't go back again unless they had bad weather. And then in the fields of medicine, we were pretty much used as guinea pigs to be experimented on. You have the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. You have Henrietta Lack. I talked about that back then in my dissertation. So we were just, at every turn, we were being sabotaged or just used and just set up to fail in every avenue. So then I ended it with looking at social services, and I actually did a case study on a patient I was treating. She was a Black woman, had lost her children to DCFS, and all of those factors had affected her. Religion, seeing Jesus as white, depressed all the time. She didn't feel like, she always thought God was mad at her, that she just couldn't do enough to please God. And then, she had an inferior education. The judicial system had failed her a number of times. And then now she had to come see me for social services for me to talk to her about her depression or her problems or not having her children. So it was just a vicious cycle. So I was able to see the racism in all those 5 major institutions that we you can't escape it. You got to have politics, you got to have medicine, you got to have I guess you can choose to have religion and social services. So it's like a cancer. Racism is. It just kind of eats away at the person.
I have a question for you,
Mm-hmm.
and I have this fascination with intelligence tests, so I love
Mm-hmm.
to read up on them. But I've read various articles where it's definitely a big tool with white supremacy. How has the use of intelligence tests by the white supremacists have affected the mental health of our children and adults? Because I mean, if you was an adult, you was once a young child that was subject to being your intelligence being measured. But can you shed some light on that?
Okay. Well, the famous book or whatever is called The Bell Curve Study by Charles Murray. And they talked about Black people being basically, inferior in terms of education towards white people, that we do worse on standardized tests and tests of intelligence in comparison to white people. We supposedly score like a whole standard deviation lower than whites. But the test itself is fraught with problems. For example, the IQ test is mainly based on what you're exposed to. So if you grew up in a home with educated parents, you'll be exposed to more topics, more things. And then it's certain things that Black children may not know the formal names for certain things. Say, for example, the word sink. That's one of the items on the test question. Children are shown a picture of a sink, and you ask, what is that? Some kids would mispronounce it, like call it a zinc, like down south. It's diction. But you're not saying it right, so you're not scored for it. Then you also have the issue of examiner bias. So if you have a white person administering a IQ test to a Black child, their standards may be a little bit more harsher towards a white child. Say, for example, a child may know the word fool or the word lie, but you're told that's a bad word. So they may not say the word. They may know it, but may not say it because they think they're cursing. Another thing is a picture of a man with a turban on his head. Now, when you show that picture to a child, the question is, what is this article? We'll call that, what is this item, or what does he have on his head? So the Black child would say it's Jesus because he got the turban on and the long thing. So they're scored wrong. But the answer is a turban. Now, how many Black children have, when I was growing up, ever heard of the word turban or even saw people with turbans on? You see what I'm saying? So if you're restricted in your culture, you're not exposed to certain things, you're not going to know about it. So the test is normed on what a white child is exposed to, as opposed to what I may have been exposed to or told. Certain things, if you're not around it, you're not going to know. And just like something as simple as a faucet, most kids know what it is, functionality, but the official name faucet, you may not know that. But so that doesn't mean that you're, not intelligent, but you never had any form of knowledge or training of what that term is. So it's fraught with biases, and it was used in an unjust way to, to put Black children in special education. And special education, that program was an experiment. It was started in Arkansas, where I'm from, where they unjustly put a lot of Black children in special education classes. And sometimes it was something as simple as you couldn't understand their diction. It wasn't that they were slow or not smart. It's just the way we spoke. So you put somebody in a slower class, you separate them from other children, you're different because you're in the slow kids class, you're on the short bus, so you get this stigma. And then we become afraid of tests. And then we have test anxiety. So it's just a whole bunch of things. But white children, they're sent to camps in the summer to just take tests. They see their parents reading more. Nobody in their house seems to be afraid of books or reading. White boys are not teased for being smart. Black boys are. When you become a teenager, you want to have other attributes than reading. I don't know no other race that's teased for being too smart. But Black, you're too smart. Chris Rock even talked about it in his comedy. He said, nobody cares if you got a master's degree. Don't come around here with all that counting. So what you supposed to be, a master or something?
This, you know what? You that's so true, because I remember my daughter coming home to me one day from school, and she was upset with the amount of bullying that was going on at her school, and the type of students that were being bullied. They either had some type of learning disability, like a learning disability, or either they had like a stuttering problem, or they may have had a physical disability. And she would just be appalled at how other children tease them. And it's so sad. I'm not to say that other cultures do not bully as well. I mean, statistically they do, but it's just to support what you're saying. My daughter would come home countless times talking about the type of students that were bullied. It's either smart children or the children who had the, like I said, like the disabilities. And it's just so sad that in our community, how the effects of white supremacy has shaped the way we think on how we should view one another and view ourselves.
We value certain things in our culture, and unfortunately, there was a time where it wasn't a lot of value placed on, or transmitted to children about it's okay to be smart. And some, not in every home, but Black children got that from somewhere, wanting to downplay how smart they were, wanting to dumb it down, and especially with Black boys. And then also, it was a book written called the Black Male Fourth Grade Failure Syndrome. It's a Black author in Chicago, Dr. Kawanza June. I can't pronounce his last name, but he's in Chicago. He wrote this book called The Black Male Fourth Grade Failure Syndrome.
Yeah. Right. I know you're talking about.
They have no desire to even be in school, because by the time Black boys are born, they're smarter than their white counterparts. They meet their developmental milestones quicker. The Black female child is more advanced than the Black male and other babies in other races. But for some reason, with the Black male, by the time they get in the fourth grade, that desire to learn, it has been just, the spirit is broken. And because if they can do the same act as a white male child can do in the classroom, they may be a little excited about recess, or maybe a little excited to see their fellow classmate coming to school, and they can engage in the same behavior. But the Black male child, his behavior will be considered too aggressive, acting out. He's immediately punished or sent to the office. But if Forrest does it, he's just, he just has a lot of energy. I mean, he was just so glad to see Philip today. But you let a Black child do the same thing, he's going to be, his responses are going to be way more punitive. And he's going to be sent to the office a lot quicker. So you're constantly getting rejected. So by the time you get to the fourth grade, you're like, I would rather just not be here. I would rather be with my friends. Or that's how, by the time they get in eighth grade or junior high school, they're dropping out. They're hanging out with their friends. And they would rather be with them in the community than at school, being made to feel, worthless and not valued or overlooked. You can have a bunch of children know the answer to a question, but if that white teacher doesn't pick that Black child, then he's stifled then. Or if I can engage in the same behavior as my white peer, but I'm gonna have a much harsher consequence if I do the same thing he does. We both engage in horse playing, but my behavior may result in a suspension. His might just be, Hunter, don't do that. So.
Dr. Steffi, this is like you say, my dear. I'm laughing because every time I hear you say hunter and
Yeah, that's my name for them. Hunter and
hunter,
Forrest.
yes, I'm cracking up because I don't know many hunters and
That's
forests,
why I picked it.
That was
but
a
that is
subliminal message she was dropping.
yes, that is
Mhm.
uh, hilarious, and the subliminal
Uh-huh.
thing, the subliminal message behind hunter and forest, as Dr.
Okay.
Hakima just mentioned.
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily saying get to it right now, but we know that this is exactly a part of some of the reasons that many of us as Black people suffer because we are hunted
There you go.
down, not
Hmm.
only in a damn forest,
You
but on the
tracking with me?
streets of just about any city
Mm-hmm.
nationwide and worldwide. So as I
Exactly.
listen to you, I'm cracking up laughing because
Yeah.
I hear you. I
Mhm.
understand hunter and forest,
The
okay?
subliminals, right?
Because we're being hunted in the
Mm-hmm.
forest of the hells of North America on a daily basis.
24/7. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Um, with that being said, you mentioned two of my favorite people, which you in Black America, you cannot talk about mental health and the effects of racism,
Mm-hmm.
or racism and the effects of mental health, without talking about our beloved late Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, as
Yes.
well as her mentor, our brother Neely Fuller.
Mm-hmm.
Now, our brother mentioned, or one of his famous quotes is, if you do not understand white supremacy, racism,
Mm-hmm.
what it is, and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you.
Confuse you.
Um,
Exactly.
has
Mm-hmm.
always been one of my favorite quotes by him.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that he mentions, he talks about, or he says that the fear, frustration, the malice, and confusion that is caused by racism retards or prevents all constructive activity between the people of the known universe. Now, with that being said, I want you to talk a little bit about white genetic survival
Mm-hmm.
and the impact that it has on our Black mental health, which kind of
Ooh.
goes back to Forrest
Mm-hmm.
and damn Hunter.
There
But
you
Woo!
I'll let you touch on that for just a minute.
go. Okay. Well, at the crux of white supremacy is the fear of genetic annihilation. That's why white supremacy it's a structured system, and it's basically a game that white people play, and it's a game of survival for them because they know that they can be genetically annihilated by Black people, in particular the Black man, because the Black man he can genetically annihilate their bloodline. He can mate with 2 or 3 white women in one day and shut down one white man's bloodline. And that's what they're afraid of. And so that's why they have this elaborate system in place to just to stop, subvert, kill, lock up the Black male. So that's why you can go to any prison and you'll see the majority Black men there or non-white people there. Anybody with any melanin, you can find them locked up in a prison, because if they don't kill them, they want to lock them up, because the point is they want to keep us from reproducing, and then to stop us from having any opportunity to annihilate them genetically, because a white man cannot genetically annihilate anyone, but a Black man can genetically annihilate the white male. So that's why he goes to these terrific lengths, to kill, hurt, subvert us. So that's the whole point of white supremacy.
Ooh, you dropped a heavy one. I want to read something. It's the Virginia Code of 1705.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 1705, but once I read it, it'll be like, you say 2018? No, Virginia Code of 1705. Removed criminal consequences for killing a slave, or just say Black person,
Mm-hmm.
in the act of correcting them.
Mm.
Isn't that deep?
It's
And it
very
was
deep.
referred to as the Casual Killing Act.
Mm-hmm.
Slaves lacked the most basic protection under law, the right of self-preservation. Now, I know that says there was a Virginia Code of 1705, but we're dealing with that in 2818, where a white person can kill us in the act of correcting us, or quote unquote standing their ground and defending themselves. That we have no right under the law of self-preservation. So even though that says 1705, all slave codes are still in effect. Our people need to understand that, and it is ultimately affecting our existence. We need to wake up and recognize this. Thank you so much for pointing that out.
Exactly. And so, and the reason why, you know, they can just kill us outright, and then Dr. Francis Cress Welsing spoke about justifiable homicide. So that's what we're seeing today with the police killings. A police officer, anytime you see a police officer shoot, kill, or maim a Black person, they're going to get away with it because technically it's a justified act, because that white officer feels a extra layer of a threat to their integrity, of their well-being or their life, because they already know that they can be genetically annihilated by that Black man. So that's number one. If he mates with a white woman, he can genetically stop his bloodline. And then two, they in their mind, they're constantly have these thoughts about us being violent, that we're going to do to them what they did to us. So they already see us as a viable, clear, and present threat and a danger. So when they shoot you, other white people, the other white jurors, they understand, you know, I'm afraid of them too, you know. So they keep saying, well, I thought he had a gun. And they know that 9 times out of 10, there is no gun. And, you know, so they would wind up getting away with it because it's justified in the minds of white people, because our lives are not valued. And they have to, you know, eliminate us because their very existence is constantly being threatened. Because they're not producing as many children as they would like. They have a lot more of their people dying, you know, getting old and dying. So that's, you know, why they have why they call it the doomsday clock. You got, for every one person you have dying, getting old and dying, you need to have some younger person having children. And so, you know, white women fertility rates are not as impressive as ours. So, you know, it's a problem. They have more people dying than they have being born. And then they're the only people on the planet that lacks melanin. And you can just mate with this one person and your bloodline can be terminated. So it's a constant threat. So they will always get away with killing us as a police officer. It's always going to be justified.
Yeah, it's so true. You know, a lot of us, they have quite a few of our Black scholars, but can't actually prove it, but many of our Black scholars have projected that there was a meeting between the KKK and President Nixon. We'll take off these hoods if we can put on that blue. So, I mean, and understanding that history, whether we could prove that or not, the action is being proven, because they ain't wearing hoods no more. They wearing badges.
That's right.
That's and then they're going over to Israel and being trained, you know, with coming back with these Mossad type tactics, these one move chokeholds, breaking people's neck, killing somebody. You're supposed to be restraining somebody for selling some cigarettes on the street, and they wind up dead because they're using much more lethal means to so-called control us. And New York City police officers, they spent a whole lot of money sending their officers over to Israel to be trained to come back with these aggressive tactics.
Wow, I didn't know that. I mean, as an officer myself, you know, in your training, you go through what is called control tactics. So you're taught how to subdue someone. You taught how to take them down, to restrain them. But when people say in the streets, they don't have the right training. They have the right training. They use the right training when they're dealing with the Caucasian and they don't kill them. Like
de-escalation tactics.
Yes, right. They use de-escalation tactics when it's Caucasian people, but not when it's us. I mean, like the guy, John, I think his name is John Cowell, who the man that stabbed Nia Wilson in California. He
Yeah.
stabbed her and her sister. I think her sister's name is Stephanie, but he stabbed her.
Mhm.
When they arrested him, there was
Mm.
practically no force used. But we know if it had been a black man, he'd be dead by now.
Exactly.
So
And,
I
and,
mean,
and white
they
people,
are properly trained in control tactics, so they know. And you're
exactly.
right; they know how to take that to the extremity of death, and they know how to
Mhm.
restrain from using it. So
Mhm.
you're right.
Right. And like I said,
It,
New York is #1 in sending their officers there, all the way overseas to be trained with these lethal tactics. And Chicago is doing the same thing. You know, the minister talked about that also about the police officers, and especially when Ferguson, the riots broke out in Ferguson after they killed that young man, Mike Brown, and they found out that that the police had these extreme measures to deal with like small crowds for a protest. And so, like I said, New York is like the most aggressive, and in Chicago is not too far behind.
wow.
And not only with the weapons they're using, not only the bullets, the guns, and also like these restraint methods are very lethal. And you never hear about them using those methods on a white person. You never heard a white person dying from being choked out by the police.
No, you hear about them going through a Burger King drive-through to get
Hmm.
dinner after they've shot up 9 people inside of a church.
Right.
That's what you hear.
Rewarding them,
Um, yeah,
rewarding them,
exactly.
and
You
and
know,
they they're and see, so that's the game they play. They're rewarding
mhm,
somebody like Dylan Roof because all those black people he killed in that church, you know, that's a point scored for them.
absolutely. You make such an excellent point. The last point, that's a point scored for them. And that's exactly how they look at it. And this is why they can have a rally, where the Ku Klux Klan can decide that they want to have a rally, and all these other white supremacist organizations, because
Pay for it.
they know that they are supporting one another. This is how um, this
It's a game that
Dylan
they're
Roof
playing, and they
can
intend to win.
absolutely, even after that incident happened with the shooting in Carolina, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if the dollar amount, but it was in the millions
Hmm.
that was raised for
Within a matter
this
of minutes.
within, do you hear me?
Within a matter of minutes.
Millions in a matter of minutes, because
Minutes.
you took out the life of
Hmm.
9 black people,
Hmm.
and your people
And one was a
behind you.
politician.
Come
Hmm.
on now. So we have to hmm,
See, the point of white
we
supremacy,
yeah.
it's a game
Mm,
that they're playing to win. And think about, just like the Chicago Bulls when they had their dynasty of winning in basketball. In order for them to
mhm.
have been that successful, all of those players had to know the game, the rules,
Yes.
the plays. Everybody was on the same page. If you didn't know the rules and the fundamentals of that game, they could not have become champions. So white supremacists, their whole strategy is to keep us guessing. We have to wonder, well, I wonder why them police got off for killing Trayvon Martin, or why did they get off for killing Mike Brown, or why did they get off for killing beating up Rodney King? Because we don't know the game. We don't know when it. We don't know
We
this
don't
white supremacy
realize that we are being hunted.
haunted and killed and corpse left hanging in a forest. That's what Neely Fuller was saying. If you don't
This is
understand
what
white
they
supremacy,
do. This is
that's what
like
they do.
you talk about a game. People, my beloved listeners out here, know that this is real talk.
Yeah.
I playfully mentioned Forrest and Hunter, but do you know that there's a forest out there, not just the streets of
Mm-hmm.
any major city, but there's a real green forest. See, these
Yeah.
movies that you see on the big screen, we
Mm-hmm.
go out and we get all caught up into the action. Hmm. One of the things that I recall the Honorable Elijah Muhammad making mention of is that he's going to show it on the screen first, meaning your
Mm-hmm.
open enemy, your mortal enemy, he's going to show it on the screen first. But if he's
Mm-hmm.
showing it on the screen, know that he's already done it. And I'm not saying first,
Exactly.
he's already done it.
Yeah.
So when you
It's
see
already
some
a
of these
reality.
what is that one movie that they have so many parts to it, but basically about what we're talking about, where the black man and woman is being hunted in the forest. I forget the name of it,
Hunger
but
Games.
they have a they have a lot of these. See, it's symbolic. It's symbolic. All of these things are symbolic of us. You know, one of the things that our sister, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, mentioned, she said historically, white males worldwide have suffered the deep sense of male inferiority and inadequacy because they represent a mutant, genetically recessive minority population that can be genetically annihilated by all non-white people. You mentioned this earlier, and so I'm really bearing witness to what you said earlier. She also goes on to say that the gun, as a symbol in the white supremacy system or culture, she said it cannot be banned because it is the symbolic phallus substitute for the white male. The white male's penis and his testicles genetically cannot annihilate black and other non-white males, but his gun can. Therefore, to ban the gun for the white male is to castrate him symbolically and to remove his defense mechanism for the ever-present threat on white genetic annihilation.
There you go.
So everything that you mentioned earlier, and when we talk about these doggone games that are being played with us mentally. See, they start mentally first, because if you get us mentally, then everything else is going to fall in submission. If you can take away our ability to just think for ourselves, to just think about what makes sense and what does not make sense, like you mentioned earlier, while they already know the answer, they have us over here trying to figure it out. It's no different from somebody who has a poker face, you know, or what's the purpose in a game of blackjack, spades, or, you know, poker? You don't want your opposition to know exactly what you're thinking. So you're going to always fool them. You're going to always trap them mentally first. And that's exactly what is being done to us.
And that's why they keep us thinking that they love us. And all of these songs that have come out over the last 20, 30 years have something to do with love or peace. And it's none of that. They're hunting us. We're at war. And that's why that's one of the 9 activities, people activities that Neely Fuller talked about.
Yes.
We're at war.
Akila, you had a question for Dr. Turner?
Yeah, I really want to, at this point, ask, how can we, as Black people, undo the damage that's being done? There was a book that's out, I believe her name is Joy DeGruy, called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Right.
Yes, Dr. Joy.
Yeah, and I would love for you to kind of touch on post-traumatic slave syndrome, and is that what's really going on with most of us? Because a lot of times they say that even in our communities with all the crime and all this stuff, we have post-traumatic stress. But also, as a community, it seems that we probably really do have post-traumatic slave syndrome. But we do. So you could just kind of touch on that, but then also after that, talk about how do we protect our mental health as it pertains to all of these things.
Okay. All right. Well, the main thing I want people to take away from the horrors of white supremacy and racism is that, you know, it's an abusive act, and so we are abused, and if you're abused, that can lead to feelings of trauma, and so anybody that's victimized people commonly develop emotional or psychological problems that's typically secondary to their abuse, and that can include anxiety, depression, and other types of disorders. But the main one that it tends to lead to is like something like post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's what the author you spoke of was comparing it to. And so, and people that are suffering from like post-traumatic stress disorder, they tend to fall victim to using substances to try to cope with the trauma, or they may become withdrawn or isolated. And one of the other things is that people, victims of post-traumatic slave disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, they experience vivid, unwanted, and highly intrusive memories of the traumatic event. The intrusive recollections may occur during waking hours or during sleep, often in the form of vivid and repetitive nightmares reenacting the trauma. And I'm going to pause right there on that topic and bring up this point. That's why those images that we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years of different people, Black men and Black women like Sandra Bland being killed by the police, we're seeing these graphic images. For us to see that in our mind subconsciously, see, the subconscious mind can't tell if something's a joke or if it's the truth. It just knows that it happened. So we're experiencing this all over again, and it's causing us to have physiological and psychological reactions. We're having anxiety about it. We're going to bed dreaming about it. We're anxious about being out in society. We have to have this uncomfortable conversation with our children about how to behave if you got kids that can drive a car. If the police pull you over, you got to do this, you got to do that. Forgetting the fact that they're just learning to drive and got to navigate the environment. You got to worry about helping this adult white male that's an authority figure manage his emotions. If he pulls you over and you say the wrong thing, you could end up dead. That's a lot of stress and anxiety. And the second thing that victims of post-traumatic stress disorder, they make extreme efforts to avoid exposing themselves to anything that may remind them of their trauma. And just like each of you ladies, I wonder, do any of you all have any like apprehension or resistance to looking at any slave movies or any race-based movies? I have to prepare myself before I can sit down and watch. Like if a new movie comes out about, like when 12 Years a Slave came out, I couldn't just go see it. I had to ease my way into it because I didn't feel like it making me sad or anxious. Did any of you all feel that way? Can you just watch a movie?
Makes me angry.
It makes me angry too. For me, it's not that I could not watch it. I did have to prepare myself, but I was ready. I was ready for war. So it's like my thinking was, let me go to this movie so I can see some stuff, so that I can hype myself up to prepare myself to go.
Do you think your white colleague Hope and Grace have to prepare themselves to watch a movie?
There you go, through subliminal messages.
There you go. You're tracking with me, right?
Oh yeah. So they definitely had to prepare themselves. They definitely had to prepare themselves.
But in actuality, they kind of don't. They just show up and eat popcorn.
Exactly.
You said
that's what I would
prepare themselves because they're not going to be traumatized because they're going to win.
They have to prepare themselves for me after I've seen it.
They need to.
Because that's what I'm saying. After I've seen it, now I'm hyped. Like after seeing the Django. After seeing Django, okay.
I was
after
ready
seeing, I was ready. So they needed to prepare themselves for me. But you make an excellent point.
With Hope and Grace, they don't have to prepare themselves. They just show up, and they even have our brothers in movies. I took a class called Psychology of Media. Our Black males, like Brother Wesley Snipes, he played in movies where the Black male would go to another country to save this white woman or this pretty little white child. They'll dodge bullets, jump on moving trains, stick their head in the mouth.
Think about what that did to us. See, we're not looking at this. I want us to really look at the trauma Black man and Black woman.
So it makes us feel rejected. Not as needed. And I'm gonna tell you, what was those movies where the little short white guy and Danny Glover played in it, Lethal Weapon? They had Lethal Weapon 1 and 2. Do you notice now, Danny Glover stands about 6 foot something tall, and Mel Gibson, the little short white guy. Mel Gibson could outrun a Danny Glover. Anytime they got into a confrontation, Danny Glover wound up on the floor. Oh, And little short
Mm.
Bill Gibson had to come run and
You're right. You're right.
pick him up off the floor. After I analyzed that first lethal weapon, I couldn't stand to watch the other ones that followed because it kept portraying the black man as incompetent, clumsy. He could
Yes.
never quite get his gun to shoot. He could never quite get a punch to
Who was the
land.
buffoon? He was
So
a
then why,
buffoon.
if he can't protect us, if he's constantly falling down, he can barely run, he can't get his gun to shoot, then now me as a woman, what is that doing to my mind? Well, you know what, he can't protect me. Well, maybe I need to go and get with this one.
Okay, there you go.
Maybe I should choose another Hugh to be my partner in life, because maybe this black man doesn't have what it takes, or what I need to protect me and my children, or me and my offspring.
There you go.
All of these things being dropped on our mind, affecting our mental health.
But see, they're playing this game to win. And say, for example, like Danny Glover kept falling down, couldn't get up and run. Like Dr. Cress Wilson said, the white man started dressing us like in the 70s in high heels. So you can't run after nobody, the white man, to help defend us because you got on heels. Now they're putting our brothers in dresses. You know, these new entertainers coming out with dresses and wearing women's shoes. So how you gonna defend me and help me and protect me? You got on a dress and some heels. How fast can you run to get to our baby that may be trapped in a car or something? You got on heels. You got on skinny jeans.
So basically, one of the first things we need to understand in overcoming the detriment of white supremacy, we have to understand that we are at war.
And this game they running on us.
Pretty much what you're saying. I agree with you on that one. What else can we do to overcome the effects of white supremacy?
Basically, do what we're doing tonight, having these conversations about it, these honest questions, these hard-hitting questions about it, and then just being honest about our anger and rage about it, and then, talking about it, and then decoding it like what we're doing. We're breaking it down. It is an actual game that's being ran on us, and they don't love us. They don't want to get along with us. They want us to stay deaf, dumb, and blind, and want us to keep scratching our head and trying to figure out why we didn't get any justice. Because we can't give you any. Because if I gave you justice and let you live, then I can't live because you can genetically annihilate me.
That's right.
And they're so disrespectful. Do you remember last year during the hurricanes when Puerto Rico got hit real bad? Those are our brown brothers and sisters.
That's right.
Our president or your president or somebody's president went over there and was passing out relief aid. Okay. Did you notice what he was doing with those paper towels? He was jump shooting them, 3 points. Faking like he's shooting a basketball, throwing it to those brown people.
Wow.
This ain't no basketball game. I thought about Francis Cress Wilson and that basketball because he ain't got no brown ball in his hands because his own testicles are not brown and they're not big.
Pink.
And they're pink and they're not infected.
Pink and pale.
Pink and pale, but he fake shooting some basketball at the Puerto Ricans who need water, who need food, who need their country rebuilt. So, it was symbolic.
Yes.
But how do we
jump shooting some paper towels?
So let me list what we have so far as our solutions. Number one, we have to understand that we're at war. If you're a person that's being hunted and you don't understand you're at war, the war will continue because you have not yet come into the understanding or the realization that you are the one being hunted. Number two, we need to talk about this openly in our community, in our households, in our community. But let's be careful with our young 5 to 11-year-olds when we talk about it. We need to censor it because it may be too much for them. So we might have to lightly bring them into it or not bring them into that conversation until they can fully understand it. So talking about it amongst ourselves helps us be able to vent about it, and it's a way of release. Number three, right, age very appropriate. Number three is to be honest. We're in denial. I mean, we have our people who are actually in denial. I'm tired of telling people, you're in denial that we are at war. No, that's not it. We don't want to
have some listening to this conversation that we're having right now, and they're going to deny that everything that you're saying and that we're saying, oh no, that ain't true. They making this stuff up. You said they, but go ahead. That's a whole nother disorder.
That's a whole other
Steffie
disorder.
can talk about.
Right. We have to decode it. We have to really break down the actions of the European and the actions that he bring on us. We have to break it down and understand it. He's facing genetic annihilation. So if you understand that he is facing genetic annihilation, you can see the haste movement in his destruction for us. He's afraid. He's fighting for his life. While we came with the earth, and we're going to be here long after he's here and still with the earth, understand that he's under a limited amount of time. For him, time is something that can be controlled. For us, time is a resource. The last one is the last one. You know what? Dr. DeGray said that in her book. So I have to give a shout out to her. She pointed that out. Thank you, sister. I love it. I said, it explains why we're so smooth with our time and we're not under so much pressure. The last thing that was mentioned was we can't look to our oppressor for justice. We have to seek justice. And if we're going to sit around and wait and think that he's going to give us justice, we'll all be annihilated by that time. So those are the 5 solutions that is named. If there's anything else we need to add to that list.
I want to add one thing, and that is that we have to protect the womb of the Black woman and the womb and the mind of the Black children. Because think about the fear that goes into the unborn child. Because the seed that was given to the mother was made in fear. The mother carries the seed in fear, and then she produces a child who already comes here afraid of his oppressor or afraid of her oppressor. We have to protect the mind of the unborn child and the children that are living so that they'll know that there's none to fear. We need to be aware. We need to know what they're up to and that their plan or what their plan is, but we cannot fear them, because if we continue to fear them, then we've already lost the game. So protecting the womb of the Black woman, and I'm talking about her mental womb, her mind, as well as protecting the womb, her actual physical womb where she carries her children for 9 months.
Because only 2 people that's involved in the making of life. That's God and the woman.
You know what, Dr. Steffie Turner, I want to thank you so much for joining in with us on our podcast. Oh my God, it's been such a blessing to have you on here. We will have to have you come back again. I also want to thank my co-hosts, Akila and Lakashay, for always, every week, co-hosting this wonderful podcast. But Dr. Turner, if there's any last words you would like to say to our listeners.
Well, what I wanted to say is that, that if there is anyone out there that is having any thoughts about suicide or feel that you're having a mental health crisis, at the least, please dial, 911 or go, call 911 or go to your nearest outpatient clinic or your practitioner if you have any thoughts of harming yourself or things like that, because suicide is real, not only as we talked about for children, but for just adults, period. So it's a lot of people suffering from depression right now, and some people may be having some thoughts of self-harm because we did talk about it. So it's no shame in calling someone and asking for help. And you can always start out with just a basic phone call, 911, or calling your local mental health center.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to say to our listeners, if you have any additional questions for Dr. Turner, please send them to us at Ask Your Royal Empress. We will make sure that we forward those to her for her to answer them. And we will definitely have her answer the question for you. So please feel free to do that if you have any more questions for Dr. Steffie Turner. Thank you all, and we look forward to you joining us next week for our conversations with Royal Empress.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Conversations with the Royal Empress. Tune in next week for another enlightening conversation. For more information on the Royal Empress, please visit the website royalempress.org. You can also follow the Royal Empress on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Conversations with the Royal Empress is a subsidiary of the Royal Empress organization. All rights reserved.